making movies is hard.
Making movies is hard.
Welcome. This is the podcast about the struggle of being an independent filmmaker. I'm Alrik Basel, the founding host of the podcast, and I'm a sci-fi horror filmmaker, and my first feature film, The Ultimate, will be coming out later this year. I have the release date. I'm not sure if I should announce it. I think maybe I should. Can I announce it, Liz? How does this work?
Yeah. How's it going to hurt? I don't see how that's going to hurt.
September 13th, the movie is coming out. We don't know where or how, but that's the release date. So keep your eyes open for it.
Congratulations. My bread and butter release date was September 1st. So September's a good month. I am Liz Manischel. I'm a writer, director, producer who has made 2 features, Bread and Butter and Speed of Life. And I'm currently in development on a smattering of others. I'm a distribution consultant who used to manage Sundance's creative distribution initiative, and I do sales.
And you do sales. You can be my sales agent one day, Liz.
Woohoo. This
week, we welcome writer-director Naveen Chathapuram on the show to talk about making his first feature, The Last Victim, which hits theaters on May 13th. And he talks about how he made it over the course of 8 years, how the film was financed, and why it took him so long to direct his first feature after he was producing for over a decade and producing successful things. It was very interesting. After that, Liz asked me a question about piracy, which I'm excited to discuss. But first, Liz, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm trying to think of film-wise what's on deck. I think only thing worth even talking about for our little back and forth here is I'm trying to not take on more than what a director is supposed to take on. Do you know what I mean? You're in development on something and I'm noticing my film team expects me to be the secretary of the film team, and they expect me to send out the Zooms. They expect if I don't schedule it, no one else will schedule it. And I've realized I'm going to stop doing these things that I normally would be doing because they're not my job. And I'm just going to be the director. I'm going to come up with the cast list if they ask. And I'm going to work on the deck if they ask. But I'm not going to try to control everything. So that's what's going on for me right now. What about you?
Well, I have a comment first. So this is kind of what I was talking about or getting at when we were talking about projects, I think last week or the week before. There needs to be some person who is the force of the project to push it forward, right? There has to be somebody who is setting all the meetings, making sure people are doing the things they need to do, pushing the boulder up the hill, right? And normally that's the director if it's your own project that you wrote and that you want to make happen. But in your case, you're a hired on director, you're not that person. But it's so interesting that everyone's looking to you to be that person. And they want to hire that person. But it's you morons don't understand, no offense to your team, that person is not hireable. Yeah. That person has to be born from the project. There needs to be someone who's this is my baby and I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that it happens. And if you don't have that person, movie don't happen. It's not gonna happen, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what it feels
I think you're totally right. I think though what complicates it, at least in my world, and I'm not going to generalize and say this is gendered for everyone in the world. But what complicates it is that I've been an assistant and I am a lady and I really resent the expectation to take on administrative tasks. The problem is exactly what you're talking about, which is the administrative tasks are actually what drive projects. It's the weirdest thing. If you don't schedule the call won't happen. If you don't organize the schedules, you can't schedule the call. And I guess it's not that weird because administrative work drives a bureaucracy. So I shouldn't be surprised. But I'm just trying not to do it too much because I don't want that expectation to be. I remember I worked at Sundance and my boss expected me to schedule calls for him that I wasn't going to be a part of. And I had to tell him, I'm if I'm on the call, I will schedule it. That's my job as manager of this department. But if it's your call, that's your job. And he understood. And we're in a world right now where there shouldn't be expectations from the only female member of the crew to be the one honoring the calendar. Right.
Or the director even. And since you're both, it's I think that's it should be the person who is hiring you. That person who brought you on, they're the ones who need to be assigning all the meetings, setting all the schedules, pushing the boulder up the hill because they're the one whose project it is. Yeah. You're just a piece of it, And so I don't think people get that. Like people like think if they hire a producer, they hire a director, it's like that is like going to be the person who's going to take it off their hands and make their dreams come true. If you find the right producer, you find the right director. But that is not how it is. They're just a piece. So if it's your project, you're the one to do it all. Right. And I love that you're drawing that line in the sand to be like, this is not my thing. I will do my job, but I'm not doing everyone's job.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what you have to do when it's your own project. You kind of have to do a little bit of everyone's job in order for it to at least get started, you know?
But then it pays off, right? Because then you move forward with your project that you care about.
Right. And I think that's the difference between someone who makes their own stuff and someone who just works on stuff is like you're willing and able to do it. You know, like I was just talking to somebody the other day and they were like, they just freely admitted, they're like, you know, I've had my own project I wanted to make for years, but I keep on not doing it. And I realized that I am not the person to do this. Like I just don't have the desire or the whatever it is to do what, you know, a filmmaker does. And it's like, it's interesting to have that, you know, and maybe that's not going to be true forever. Maybe that's just true for that moment in that person's life. But to come to that realization that you're not that person to like push the boulder up the hill, because it's literally that hard, people. Like it's not even like that's like as an analogy, but it does feel that way. Like you literally have to do every little thing to make sure the thing happens. So yeah, for me, what's going on? I've got a pitch this week. Ooh, pitch time. Yeah, exciting. I don't remember. We probably talked about it on the show, but I pitched a bunch of ideas to a production company, some investment people, and they finally came back and they liked 2 of the ideas. And I'm pitching against, I think, 3 other ideas. And so they're saying, okay, well, we like both, but let's do this one first. And then if this one doesn't work out, then we can talk about pitching the other one after. But yeah, it's a whole thing. We might go to Prague to shoot it potentially because it's a Prague-based company.
That's so exciting.
I don't know. It's nuts. It's crazy. Well, I mean, it's so early. Like, you know, we had a little pre-meeting about it yesterday. We were like researching the company and everything. And we're like sort of getting like some like, you know, some ideas of what is happening here and like what the situation is. But we don't really have very much information. We have very little. And so we're going to go into the meeting probably with like as many questions as answers, you know, and it's going to be like a pitch, but it's going to be more like a 2-sided pitch because like we're going to be like, okay, well, pitch us. Like, how do you expect to do this? How are you expecting to do that? Like, you know, if you have X amount of dollars, like why is it going to be a product production? Why don't we shoot somewhere else? Like what, you know, because there's all these things that like aren't lining up based off of the information we're given. And we're like, okay, well, we need to get the details in order to actually properly, you know, do what they're at. Cause they basically said, they're like, we want to see a deck. We want to see a budget. And if you have a script, we want to see the script. And we're like, well, we can't budget it until we know like more about what we're trying to do. Like it's just too early to budget. Right. And so basically we're going to come in and be like, well, we're not providing a budget for you because it's just premature. Like it's not time to budget yet. We have to like get more information, get to know each other better, like kind of figure things out. And then if you guys want to move forward and like this project's actually something that can be made, then we'll put a budget together and take the next steps, you know? So I'm not sure if that's what they want. Like, I think they just want us to do the things they ask for, but it's like, I think instead we're going to come back to them with like, you know, our experience and our professional, you know, knowledge of how to make a movie and be like, well, before we can do these things like this, that's actually going to be real, that numbers that really will be true. Like, cause I couldn't give you a budget that says anything, but it's not actually going to be real unless I know more information. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
That's really exciting. Well, first of all, just talking to anyone, whoever has money, I get so excited. Just like, oh, you have money? You want to make a movie? Like it always feels like very rare to even get to have that chat. And then that they're really thinking and listening to your ideas and you have the chance to like sell. That's really thrilling. Yeah,
it was funny because I was talking to Jeff, my producer, who's going to join on the pitch. And he gets this all the time. He says he always hears about a new company or somebody who has money or whatever. And then when you actually have the meeting, 99% of the time, it's like they don't actually have the money. They have the connection to the money. Right. And there's all these like stipulations on how the money will come into play if you can do this for them. And then it's like, you know, you're like, wait, that's not how it works. Like,
right.
So you don't actually have any money. You need me in order for you to get the money. And I can't bring you the money you need to get your money. It's like, you know, all this weird stuff. But
all of filmmaking is chicken and egg. It's always like, like what comes first? And they never know what comes first. And they're always waiting for the other party to come first. But still, it's something to talk about. It's something to practice. It's a chance to be in the room. Like, these are all amazing things.
And it's interesting. It's not my project. I didn't write it. So like I read it, I fell in love with it. And so we're partnering with the writer. And so it's going to be me, the writer, and my producer, Jeff, on the call. And it'll be really interesting to do this three-way pitch. And it's like the first time I think the writers pitched stuff before, but this is the first time like him doing it in a group. And, it's going to be interesting. I'm excited. I'm going to learn a lot, I think, no matter what happens.
Yeah. Let us know what happens.
Exactly. But another thing that you can make happen is go to www.patreon.com/MMIH podcast to support us on Patreon. We've had a lot of lovely people supporting us on the platform lately. A lot of happy birthdays that we've been able to give out. So thank you all for checking that out. There's also lots of fun things happening on the Patreon. Especially, we're going to have a bonus episode. That's Patreon exclusive bonus episode coming out in the next couple weeks. So that's very exciting. You can also check out Jambox.io, which is a new royalty-free music and sound effects company with an emphasis on high-quality cinematic cues. Their composers have worked on soundtracks for Hollywood-level films, and they've worked with directors like Michael Bay and Martin Scorsese, and they even offer customized plans to fit your needs. So definitely go check them out. We have a promo code, MMIH, get 20% off your subscription. And it's not just the first month, it's 20% off the whole deal. So check it out. But without any more blather, here's our chat with Naveen Chathapuram.
Let's kick things off with our first question, which is not even really a question. It's something that you always do, Naveen. Can you just describe the elevator pitch for The Last Victim, or just describe what it's about?
Yeah, I would say The Last Victim lives in the same world as No Country for Old Men or Hell or High Water. So when we went into making it, I love the romantic Southwest, the vast deserts, the isolation, those things, but also the grit that comes with the genre. So I would say it's a gritty thriller that takes place in a small town in the Southwest. And it brings up all those imageries that we've all grown up with. At least I have grown up with, watching films from like Sergio Leone to Coen Brothers. So that's that. And the thriller, it has three storylines. One is of this character, Jake. He is typically, he would be referred to as an antagonist, but in this case, we don't say it's an antagonist or a protagonist. But Jake's character, there's Sheriff Hickey, and then there's an anthropologist and her husband who are driving through town. So it pulls up, I would say homages to films like Breakdown, but at the same time, Hell or High Water and, Deliverance. Deliverance is one of the films that we originally, when we came up with the story, that was one of our inspirations.
Awesome. Getting me excited over here. How many days did you shoot the film?
So we shot for 19 days. Originally planned it for about 25 days, and I was fighting tooth and nail to keep every one of those days. But as we got closer to production, I had to face reality, and I was like, so it went down to 18 days, and we had a glitch on one of the days. So we got a bonus day through insurance. So that's the 19th day.
What was the rough budget, or what can you talk about with regard to budget?
I would say it's sub $5 million, under $5 million budget. And we shot it in Canada to take advantage of their incentives. And also when, you go across the border, there's the dollar arbitrage. So because of those two reasons, we went to Canada.
Can you give a low end range? I mean, you don't have to give us a number, but is it over 800,000 and under 5 million?
No, okay. I'll be honest. It's over 2 million, under 5 million.
Think that's
there we go.
Yeah.
Love it. How did you come up with the idea for the film?
It's a very interesting story. It was back in about 2002. I was introduced to this gentleman named Dr. Neil Justin. He was an anthropologist professor who lived outside of Tucson, Arizona. And he was introduced to me through an uncle of mine. And I had just finished my first independent film as a physical producer, like a nuts and bolts producer. And so I talked to Doc and he told me to fly down to Arizona. It was my first trip. I grew up mainly in Chicago, and I had only been exposed to like New York, Chicago, LA, all the urban sort of centers. And it was my first sort of trip down to the Southwest. And I went over there, and Doc brought about 4 folders, and he had these magazine cutouts. That was his way of creating like these posters for these films. And so he had like 4 or 5 ideas. And one of them on the folder had written The Last Victim. And he asked me what I knew about making films and writing scripts and, producing it and budgeting it. And being young and just off of my first film, I was pretty arrogant. And I said, I know everything, not everything, but I just said oh yeah, I know exactly what to do and things like that. And we got to writing it together. He had written a couple of paragraphs about it. And I loved it because he had referred his inspiration as Deliverance. It was a husband and wife who were driving through this small town in Arizona. And then they come across these bad guys who are trying to get rid of these bodies. So that was the original inspiration for it. We wrote a script. We were going to shoot it in 2004. And right before production, our major location was on Mount Lemmon, and Mount Lemmon burnt down. So we pushed it at the time for a year, but then, it just got shelved until about 2017 when I wanted to direct my directorial debut. I was going through scripts that I had shortlisted from the past. And I was like, hey, this is a great genre piece that is interesting. It's contained, it's in the desert, and something that I think I could handle. So I went ahead and picked up the script. I reached out to a up and coming writer, Ashley James Lewis, whose scripts I had read on the Blacklist forum. And I had shortlisted him because, he had a great voice. He had his writing resonated with me, and he loved the bones, or he loved the structure of The Last Victim. And he said he'd be happy to jump in. And when he brought back his notes and stuff like that, it was in line with my vision. So I told him to go and write it, and he wrote it, and the script was great, and I loved it. And that's how it started.
I just wrote down 5 questions while you were I have lots of questions. You do sort of answer this, but I'm going to ask you again to see if you can add more color. How long did you spend working on the film from coming up with the idea till its release? So maybe could you add more color from 2005 to 2017? Did you do anything at all on this film during those 12 years?
Not at all. From about 2005 to 2017, I was just, cutting my teeth in the business. And this sort of had faded to the background. It would come once in a while because it would call out, because I loved the title. I loved the setting. So it would call out. And it was not until when I was at a point in my career where I had to choose a path. Do I continue on the path as a producer, or do I pivot and decide to direct? That was the original reason I got into the business. And so I knew I had to start from scratch. Everything that I had done, obviously the relationships, a lot of the experience would help me, but I had to basically say, okay, I got to put a stop to this, and I got to start from scratch here. And at that time, I was like, I needed something that's at the time I felt would be manageable and that's contained. But as this film would prove, it's one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my life. And I hear that in the podcast. I guess making any film, even when you've done multiple films, going to any film, it's a learning process. But going back to your question, I literally started September of 2017 on this particular version of the movie, and it's taken about 4.5 years to get here.
Wow, that's not that long compared to some other projects. But again, you've had this experience. Anyways, so last question is, compared to all the other projects you've made, how difficult was this project?
Like I said, it was one of the hardest things that I've ever done. And it pushed my limits mentally, physically. It came to a standstill multiple times. And it took that I had everything that I had to push it to the next level, And let me go talk about I can go from financing it to the actual production. The production was planned during the heat of summer, but as we were in prep, it kept getting pushed and pushed and pushed, and we went right into winter. And 95% of the movie happens out in the wilderness. So it was sub-zero temperatures, and, support was at least 100, 200 yards away multiple times. So for you to get a heater, you need to huddle in a tent that's 100 yards away with, propane tanks. I would say 19-day shoot, and it was very ambitious. The script was ambitious, so to make it happen, and the daylight started dropping to towards the end of the shoot, it was 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and we're losing light, and we were shooting on this waterfall scene where everything is slick and slippery, and it's salmon spawning region. So it's, we have to follow these things. So every step of the way from production to post-production, we wrapped December 2019. And we were just getting into post-production. I was supposed to fly to New York to get the edit process started, and the pandemic hit. So we had to really figure it out. And, I never thought in my life that I would edit a picture remotely. So I had to figure out how to do that. And we started editing in July. So something that should have started in February got pushed to July. But at the same time, it was enlightening. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. I have a great team, and that I was grateful to have, in my corner. So it was like, on one hand, it was pleasure, but on the other hand, it was painful, and I pushed the limits. And I'll give a little story. So when I switched from producer to director, I had a lot of insecurities, because I had built this artificial image of me as a quote unquote financier producer. So a lot of people looked at me as like a financier. So a lot of times when I see those type of producers who want to direct, it's met with like scoffs, or they're like, oh, here comes another guy who, wants to make a fool of himself as a director, like that's the kind of impression. At least that was my insecurity. So I hired this professional coach, a life coach, to sort of get my mindset in the right place for me to go tackle this. His name is Tommy Baker, and he's incidentally out of Phoenix. So I worked with him for about 3 months online through video conferences and everything. And then he said he wanted me to fly down to Phoenix, and he wanted me to clear the day before. And he said, do nothing but think about the goal you came here to achieve. So it was February 22nd, 2019. So I sat there and thought of making this movie, and the whole thing in my heart and my mind and my soul was just to make this movie. And on the 23rd, he told me to show up at the foothills of this little national park. And he said, show up at like 4:30 in the morning. So I took an Uber the next day, bright and early. And I didn't know. I thought Phoenix was going to be a lot warmer, but it was like probably 29 degrees, 30 degrees at the time, because it was February. So I go there, and I'm at the foothills of the mountain. And this is the first time I'm meeting this person in real life. And, he walks up and says, I hope you came prepared. And I was like, yeah, I'm prepared. I'm ready. And he said, okay. So we jog up this like little hill, and it's 10 minutes in, I'm panting, I can't breathe and all this other stuff. And we get on top of this hill, and he goes, are you ready to get started? And I thought we're going to just do a jog, and we're going to meditate or something. And, we're going to go to a conference room, whiteboard, and he's going to tell me how to reverse engineer my way to making this movie. And then behind this like hill is this mountain, and I forget the name of the mountain. And he's like, okay, we're running up that mountain. And about 10% of the way in, I feel like I'm blind. I'm breathing, my entire body's in pain, and I can't. And he kept saying to me, like, just keep saying the purpose why you're here. So I would say to myself, the last victim. And there was a point. So the trail, is sort of winds up, but there's like rocks in between. There was a point that I couldn't see one step ahead of me. And I lost the trail, and I started climbing these rocks. And he said, oh, that's good. Now you're forging your own path, But it got to a point where you can only think about the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. You can't think about the mountain. You can't think about what's ahead of you. And we got about 90% on top of the mountain, and I didn't think I could make another step. And he walks up, and he grabs this 25-pound rock, and he brings it to me, and he tells me to hold it. And at that time, wishful thinking, I go, okay, he's going to do some ritual. He's going to leave it on side of the mountain, and then we're going to walk down. And then he goes, the rest of the path, you're going to run up with this rock in your hands. And trust me, like, it was freezing. That's why I said the rock was like probably like ice, holding ice. And we go up to the rest of the mountain. And once we got up there, the sun was just cracking over the horizon, and it was a beautiful view. And he said, look, this rock is all the baggage that you're going to leave on top of this mountain, and you're not going to take down. And he said, this mountain is metaphorically your movie. And every time you doubt yourself, you think you cannot make that next step, you think of this mountain, think of where you are. And he said, there are going to be plateaus, there are going to be dips, there are going to be climbs. But whatever comes, just think of this mountain. And there cannot have been a better way to start the process of this movie, because I was definitely on my knees. I was definitely blind all the time. I had to say one more step, another step, until even like last week when we were getting ready for the trailer launch. So it's true. And I'm sure it's true for me over the next few months as well.
Oh my God. Like, no question. Well, Alrik will come up with a good question. I have a practical question, but I think,
yes,
I feel like intimidated by asking a question after that story is what I'm acknowledging here, because it's such a beautiful story. What struck me in the beginning of the conversation, Naveen, is you were saying, someone said, what's your experience? Can we make this movie? And you said, the follies of youth or whatever, you had a level of confidence that said, yeah, I can do anything. I'm a filmmaker. I produced my first feature.
Absolutely.
What was the plan to finance and make that first iteration of The Last Victim versus the one in 2017? Because there's this like amazing story you have in between where it seems like the film became unsurmountable, but you started out with like a lot of confidence and maybe even some conceit about what you were embarking on. So I'm just curious about like what the plan was before and then what changed to make it feel so hard.
Absolutely. So the first time we were going to make it, the film was financed. Doc was going to finance it. It was his dream to make a movie. He was an anthropologist. He had done so many different careers that his dream was to make a movie. So he said, look, I have $500,000 set aside. We're going to make this movie. Wow. So I stayed in his ranch, and every day we would meet at his coffee table, and like we'll start at 8 a.m. and we will work till 8 p.m. We'll probably take breaks and we wrote the script that way. And then I had just learned, movie magic budgeting and scheduling. So I showed him how to schedule the film. We had, scheduled for 25 days. He had already pre-planned the location. So he took me up to like Mount Lemmon, a lot of the deserts. And he said, hey, what do you think, like us doing this here, us doing that there? He would take me to trailer parks. And additionally, I mean, now after something like what happened on the set of Rust, it's scary, but Doc had 300 guns in his house, right? He's a gun collector. So he had like a safe, and he would open up and he said, he would have these ivory handled pair of Colts and Smith and Wessons and all these things, So we would go out to the desert and with like cans, and we would shoot it. But he had also like fake guns. So he would say, hey, we would use these fake guns on set and everything like that. So the plan for it was pretty set. My job was just to figure out the nuts and bolts aspect of it. First, I was going to co-direct with him. So he was going to be, quote unquote, the director. But based on my experience, I was going to help him co-direct. And then I would also produce in the process and then put together the crew, team, cast, and everything like that. And the only casting we were going to do was we were probably going to get one cast member out of LA to show up for 5 days or something like that. That was the original plan. So from that standpoint, it was not going to be that hard to do it because, Doc was going to finance it, and it was just putting together this. But the second I decided to, and also when I decided to direct it, I forgot to mention one thing. There was a serendipitous thing that happened around the time when I wanted to direct. There was a serendipitous thing that happened. Doc called me and he said, there was a voicemail on my phone. And I kept in touch with Doc over the years, and Doc called me and left a message saying, Naveen, we're making The Last Victim and you're going to direct it. So I called him and I found out that Doc wanted to make it. And he said, look, this time you're going to direct it. He's 82 years old now. And he knew, he was not going to be able to direct it, but it was his dream to make it. So now with my experience, I went to Arizona, and he said, we're going to make it for $500,000. And then I saw he had hired a local producer who had done a budget. And with my experience, I knew that with that kind of a budget, with that kind of a situation, 90% of chances is that, the film was not going to recoup its money. So I talked to Doc and I said, look, at the time I thought maybe we'll increase the budget to $1 million and let me figure out how to make it and we'll do it. But the film kept growing in the pre-production process, where at some point in time, Doc said, look, I cannot look, I can't, but I want you to do this. I want you to go make this. So one of my goals is in the next month or so, fly to Tucson and screen the movie for him. Yep.
Wow. So many questions. So many things to ask. we'll just stay on this track just since you mentioned it just recently. You talked about $500,000, then going to $1 million. Then you said that your budget is over $2 million, and we don't know exactly how much. But what I want to know is like, what was the process of trying to raise the additional funds? Like, did you take some of Doc's money plus some other money from someplace else? Did you find one investor to fund the whole thing? Like, what was your process to get to the budget for the film?
Absolutely. So what Doc's money helped me do, and I say this to all my fellow filmmakers, this is what's worked for me. What Doc's initial funds helped me do was I got a script written by Ash Lewis that I was really happy with, and I knew from my producing experience that is going to get some attention. And the way I did it is I sent it to a few colleagues of mine. One of my colleagues, Todd Berger, ended up producing this film with me. I sent it to him and said, I want to direct and I want you to read the script. And a sign that a script is going to let you make the movie or let it get financed is when someone responds saying, what do you want me to do? Instead of saying, great script, what do you want to do? A lot of the times you get a response saying, what do you want me to do? Why did you send it to me? So I sent it on a Friday to Todd, and Sunday, Todd responded saying, great script, let's talk. And then as soon as I called him, he said, what do you want me to do? And I said, hey, would you want to produce this with me? So going back to your question, script, it got a script done. I got a budget done by a line producer. I got a schedule done by a line producer, and I created a deck. And I think by this time, with a little bit of travel and everything like that, I had probably spent $13,000. And then my goal was to get, because of my experience, right? Like in the past, I had done permutations and combinations trying to figure out what the next step is. So I needed one more thing. Now that I had a producer, I had a script, budget, schedule, I needed a casting director to sort of shortlist names for me. So I called a casting director that I had worked with, Lisa Essery, and I said, look, we're trying to make this movie. So she looked at it and she said, do you have any financing in place? And at the time, yes, Doc's $500,000 was sitting in the bank. So I said, yes, half of the money is in the bank and we're going to probably have to raise the other half. And I have Todd Berger who's helping me out. And that definitely helped. So she then shortlisted names for Jake, Susan, and the sheriff. So I would say that was the base. And that's about the point when, once we got the cast, is when Doc basically decided to back out. But I at least had the building blocks at the time for me to say, okay, now let me start. So my goal was to get at least Doc's amount replaced. So I called a lot of friends, who I had worked with in the past.
Wait, just sorry to interrupt really quick. So you spent $13,000. So did you just give him the rest of his money back? And then you say, oh, I owe you $13,000? Or like, how does that work when he backs out of the movie?
It's not that I was giving any money back. It was in his account at the time.
Okay.
I hadn't even, because, until I had figured out everything and we started an LLC and all those things, I didn't want the money to be moved. So he was writing the checks, but I needed to be in a dedicated account so I can tell people, hey, the money's available. So it wasn't a dedicated account. But yeah, that's exactly what happened. By the time we had the casting director, it had gone up to about $22,000 and change. So what I said is, look, this is going to be your investment in the movie. And when the film recovers, this is when you're going to get your money back. And he was totally fine with that. And he, exactly.
Wait, and you were telling us about replacing his investment, right? So yes. I please continue. I'd love to hear more.
Yes, please tell us.
So what ended up happening was I was having multiple conversations. And right before this, I had run this company with a few other individuals based out of Singapore called Indus Media and Entertainment. So I had some contacts with, family offices and investors and those sort of things. And I called who is now one of our producers, Frank Lee. And I said, hey, look, I got this project. This is a list of actors. It looks like we're going to be able to put together a pretty good cast around this project, and that, it's going to have a market, like from just sales as licensing to, international distributors and definitely is going to have a domestic distributor. So it was a process going back and forth. I mean, I reached out to, tons and tons of people, got rejected from a lot of quarters, but Frank also reached out to his network. And finally, we were able to find an investor who came up with the equity that we needed. And fortunately, without going too much into the detail, I have one major investor, then I have another equity investor who put in a couple $100,000. And then the rest of it, I had to, finance through tax credit and then a mezzanine financing and gap financing. Because until I, when we were done with filming, we were able to get tax credit financing to go just a few more steps. And then I got the mezzanine and the senior debt for me to finally get to complete the movie. So there were a lot of challenges for us to overcome to get it completed.
Can you talk a little bit about contracts? Just because like the retelling of your relationships with Ashley James and Doc is like, yes. It could live in a romantic world where there's just honor and agreements and handshakes, but it could also live in a world where there's like very specific ownership and contract points between you. And I'm curious which pathway you chose.
Absolutely. So with Doc, just because, he's an old timer from a completely different generation. It was a lot of handshakes and, he did business like that all his life. So I had known him for X number of years. So I knew he was good for the money. So it was just pretty much a shake hand. And I said I was going to do these things and he honored it. So that was like you said, it lived in a romantic or a dream scenario. But on the other hand, so with Ash, it was a work for hire and it's an advance payment with a kicker when the film gets greenlit and he gets X% of the budget, and that was that.
For Ash, like as the budget increased, did the fee increase too? And like, does that continue to happen as you go on, or is it more like it's whatever the budget was? Like when you went into production, that's what they're getting paid the percentage off.
The fee definitely increased, but since it's his first film, we had put in a ceiling. So if the budget had gone, the budget did go to a level where it did hit a ceiling, but until it hit the ceiling, right. His rate kept getting increased.
That's smart. Okay, so I'm very curious about. Oh God, what was the question, Alrik? You had it, and it fell through the cracks. So, damn.
I have a question, and then you can interrupt me. But interrupt me if it comes.
Go.
You live in Chicago. You grew up in Chicago. We always have this conversation about LA, New York, outside of those production hubs. Curious, it sounds like all your resources came from overseas or Arizona. So did the Chicago filmmaking community, was it a part of this project?
So it seems like it came from overseas, but actually it came from all over the US based on my experience working as a producer, So I'll just tell you the story. Like 2002, after finishing my first film, I went to LA and I was really nervous and we were taking meetings to, get the film distribution. At that time, I had created this card saying my name and it said producer, but I was very shy to give it because I felt like I was an imposter. I had just done this movie and I was calling myself a producer, that kind of thing. But what happened in LA was there were a lot of young people my age who were handing producer cards back to me. And I would ask them, like, what have you done? And God bless them, right? I struggled in the business for 20 years to get to this point, but they would be like, oh, I have this in the works. I have that in the works. I'm meeting with so-and-so. And so the fear that I had was, hey, if I move to LA and I start giving this, card out, I'll get lost in the sea and I would not be able to. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go back to Chicago and I'm going to use that as my strength. And I'm going to build it from here. And when I need, and this is not all like, thought through in hindsight, it all looks like wisdom. Like I had all this wisdom, it was just stumbling, crawling, forging. You can do like my way through the business. And now looking back, it's like, oh, okay, that seemed like a smart decision. That seemed like a dumb decision. But, based on, the responses that I got from the decisions that I made. But that was my original reason to come back to Chicago. A lot of great support from Chicago. My associate producer, Gustavo. So a lot of the prep was done in Chicago. And I have a film fraternity that I lean on for a lot of things. So during editing, I edited from here, but a lot of filmmaker friends would come and in this office space, there's a conference room, would screen the film. So I would get a lot of feedback from filmmaker friends and things like that. So yes, Chicago, but then I have friends in LA and New York and now in British Columbia where we shot this, where our great crew came from.
I remember my question now. I wanted to know what mezzanine financing was, because I've heard of gap financing before, but I've never heard of mezzanine, or at least I don't know what the details are. So if you could explain that for us, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. So senior or gap is someone who helps you complete the movie. So it's like a last in, first out position, as you know, but someone who sits right behind it. So they are senior to the equity financiers, but they are junior to the gap financiers. So they sit in between the senior lenders and the equity financiers. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Awesome. I have one of those gap financiers on my project. So didn't even know it until, you just explained it to me.
Yeah.
So the next thing I really want to know, and I'm a big IGN fan. I've been, going to that site since, the early days before anyone knew what the fuck it was. But how did you get that deal? Like, was that something that you went through your distributor to get? Did you have to go through an agent? Like, how did you negotiate the trailer premiere through IGN?
It was all through the distributor. So Decal is our distributor. And, I was on a strategy call and they were like, look, we're going to drop the trailer through IGN. And they had done some research through the PR group, DDA. So I think DDA has the relationship with portals like IGN. And they said, hey, this is a, elevated genre piece. And this would be a great place for us to premiere it. And IGN said they would do a 2-hour exclusive launch for the trailer. And I'm a fan too, like Ash Lewis, my writer, he introduced me to IGN. So I became a fan of IGN and I was really stoked to find out that it's gonna launch through IGN.
Nice.
I just have one last question. And you talked about losing days going from 25 to 19 days. And can you explain in your situation what attributed to why? Why did you lose days?
Budget. So we didn't have the budget to shoot the 25 days. And a lot of times, and I've heard a lot of times, producers and you guys talk about it on the podcast, people think when I did my $500,000 movies to let's say a $7 million movie, everyone thinks it's a linear growth, like dollar for dollar. But because of the union contracts and the support that the project needs, a lot of times on a $5 million movie, like when I did my $500,000 movie, we shot that for 25 days. I've done a $900,000 movie in Louisiana where we shot 30 days. I shot a $500,000 TV series for 32 days. But, my $7 million film that I shot in Chicago in 2007, we shot like 27 days. So what happens is, just because you have larger budgets does not mean that you're going to get the time to shoot it because, the budget goes towards other things. So the goal is to protect what's shown on screen. So I was trying to hold on to those 24 days, but then about three weeks before production, it became clear that there's no way. So it's budgetary.
I also shot my first feature in 19 days, but not because I was going to shoot in 25, but because I was going to shoot in 15. And then I had to raise more money to get the days I needed to shoot the movie. But 19, I like it that there's someone else there within 19 days.
Absolutely.
So my last question is about, making the jump from producing to directing, because, producer for a long time, you have these really amazing projects, lots of growth in your producing career, which is really incredible. But did you ever find, when you were raising this money and going to make this movie that's going to be over $2 million, did you ever feel any pressure or any questions from any of the financiers that do you have the ability to direct this movie after this being your first feature at this high of a budget amount? Or did that ever come up, or was that just never a question because you knew these people, you already had the relationships?
No, that was definitely a question. That was the battle, I would say, from September 2017 to about the beginning of 2019, is to sort of show that I have the ability to direct this, not just at, more than 2 million, even at $500,000. Like, why should we back someone like this? It came in degrees. And the first support that I got was from Todd Berger. So when Todd Berger got on board as producer, then a lot of people around, it's like, okay, Todd is part of some good projects and, he's been in the business for a long time. So there was a lot of trust in him, in his judgment, right? That was number one. Then number two, when we started going to actors, we started talking to actors, and Todd, after the casting director had provided it, I think it was a year later, it was towards the end of 2018, I had this call with the first actor who was going to play Susan. And she was not a big star, but she was well known as a character actor in the circles. And after the call, she said she passed on the role. She said, I'm not going to do the role. But she went back to her manager and said, but I would love to do another project with Naveen, if he ever comes up with the project. So she had connected with me, but she didn't connect with the dark thriller aspects of the project. So the manager called Todd and said, hey, this actor seemed to have really liked Naveen. So then the confidence increased where Todd said, okay, let's go to some more established actors. And I have to give credit to Ralph. Ralph was the first actor that I ever spoke to. And, he came on a Skype call and I was super nervous. And he came on the call and said, love the script. That's the first thing he said. And we hit it off. And he went back to his agents and said, I want to do this project. So it came in degrees, and once Ralph came on board, then a lot of other people started paying attention.
Wow.
And yep.
It's really interesting because it's like, usually you hear like, oh, you have to do a test short or like, make something that we believe in. But it's interesting to hear this whole side of it where it's like, it's just the confidence that people get in like your ability to take a meeting with an actor or, have like a meeting with somebody that goes well. And then like, that's the thing that like makes them say, hey, yeah, he can do it. That's
cool. But you secured the money. Like it was a combination of things, but you were the point person you were the financing producer for this project from what I can tell. Is that right?
I would say 1/3.
Okay.
I was able to bring
still a lot of responsibility. Yeah. Had you not have brought those resources to the project, you might have been under a tougher gauntlet, I presume.
Absolutely. But it was not like Doc's money was there. We got to do certain things. Doc's money disappeared, but we were on a path. We continued on that path. But then we had pressure. Hey, now we're telling all these people that there's money in the bank. So how do we now counter this? So it was like one pressure made us go solve a problem on the left. And then that pressure made us solve the problem on the right and back, So it's just, again, going back to that one step at a time. It's like, what's the next step and what's the next step?
But it's magic because most people, and I know we're running out of time, but most people will lie about the Doc money situation. You actually had a situation where you had money and then it evolved and it changed to a different financing situation. So it's like you had this pretty magical scenario where you weren't lying and you got to progress with your project.
No, I'm thankful for that. I'm forever thankful to Doc for that. And I can't wait to fly to Tucson and have the screening for Doc and his wife, Christine. And luckily my sound mixer also lives in Tucson. So it's going to be probably the three of us.
Awesome.
We're going to watch it,
Well, let's jump into I know we have 3 minutes left, but we'll do a rapid fire final 6 questions. And the first question is, what's the first film you made and how do you feel about it now?
The first film I made is called Beyond the Soul. I call myself a producer, but I was brought in to be an AD on the project. And I was not involved, creatively in the process until we started filming. The director was from India. But what I feel about it is, that got me started in the business. But from a creative standpoint, I couldn't be apart from that vision of the project.
So many parallels. My first project, I was an AD on a feature with a filmmaker from India. Okay. I asked for a producer credit. They wouldn't give it to me because they said I didn't put any money into the movie. So
oh my God,
I got screwed. But so funny.
Let me tell you, actually, in the film, if you go back to it, they did not give me a producer credit. So if you watch the film, there's no producer credit because they had already printed it. But after it, like when we were doing the festival runs and stuff, they would address me as the
they
producer.
Allowed, at least they gave you that. They didn't even give me that respect. Like there was a moment where the DP was like this. He's like, Alrik is the producer of this movie. He should have a producer credit. You guys are calling yourself producers. You're not producers. It was like a huge rant. And then, it's like, so am I getting that producer credit? And they're like, well, we want to, but we can't. I'm like,
oh my God.
Anyways.
I know.
Anyways. Back to the questions.
Yes.
What's the best filmmaking advice you've ever received?
I think it's from my mentor, Stephen Milburn Anderson, who directed the film South Central. He said 3 things, I would say. He said, the process of making a movie is a process of making decisions. So he said, a director is nothing but a person who says yes and no's. And the second thing he told me is there are only 2 shots in a movie. Don't get scared. Like when you're in the midst of it and you're getting thrown at 1,000 questions, he said, there are only 2 shots in a movie. There is a POV and then there's the omnipresent, like what do you call it? The
omniscient camera.
Omniscient, yeah. God's perspective. Then the third thing he said is the process of making a movie is the process of eliminating distractions. So those are the 3 things that I held on to my core while I was making this movie.
Wow.
What's the worst filmmaking advice you've ever received?
Oh my God. That's a tough one. Let me ask that question to you. What's the worst filmmaking advice you've gotten?
Alrik, do you have one ready? I'm going to think about it.
Quit the business. Get a real job. I've heard that so many times where I'm like asking people, when especially as a young PA, like what do you wish I do? I want to get in the business. And yeah, be a lawyer. Get into computer engineering. It's like, well, fuck you, dude. Like, you're doing it. Well, give me something encouraging here.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
No, that I've heard a lot. It's like you should quit the business and get a real job. But filmmaking wise, I would say they're like, hey, why don't you figure out a real job in the film business so you can still be in the film business, but you can get a paycheck on a regular basis.
Right.
Yeah. So I love that, because that's like what I did basically. I mean, but looking at you, it's like you were like, no, I'm gonna actually just produce movies, and that's gonna be my day job. And it's like, holy shit! Like, why didn't I think of that?
No, but during those times, from 2002 to 2010, there were a lot of times I did have part-time jobs and other things, but while I was doing it, because movies were like, there would be a time you would make money, and then while you're in development, you're not making money. So you have to figure out a way to make money during that process,
I'm trying to think of bad advice, but honestly, it's either in one ear out the other, or no one gives me advice. And that's not because I'm too fancy for someone to give me advice. It's like, they're just like, there's Liz. I'm not going to give her advice. Moving on. I always want to hear the answer to those questions. They're my favorite questions because I never get to hear advice. What's your goal as a filmmaker?
My goal as a filmmaker is to tell inspiring stories that actually speak to me, and in a way that I can share my experiences with the world. And I would say, in a more literal sense, I'd like to tell stories at the highest level possible, whether it's for entertainment or if it's for, like the greats that we've grown up with, whether it's on one extreme, like something like Saving Private Ryan, or on the other extreme, something like Indiana Jones, or that's my dream, to tell stories that inspire at a global scale, but at the same time, from my perspective.
Beautiful. If you could go back in time, what's one piece of advice you would give yourself?
I would say don't take shortcuts. I took a lot of diversions from the path, and in hindsight, a lot of time to get to the same goal. And in hindsight, looking at it, it's like, okay, I got a lot of experience from that. But had I just stuck with it and said, look, it's delayed gratification instead of short-term, these bursts of satisfaction, I would have probably achieved a lot of things that I wanted, versus a lot of disappointment and a lot of quote unquote failings, but that ultimately brought me back to the goal. So I would say the advice to myself would be not to take shortcuts, just stick with the course day in and day out and keep moving forward towards that goal.
Is making movies hard? Like my email to Alrik, I would say making movies is impossible, and impossible is nothing. Beautiful.
So yeah, where should people go if they want to watch The Last Victim? If they want to learn more about you, do you have a website, social media handles? When's the movie coming out? Tell us all the good stuff.
Absolutely. So the film's coming out on May 13th, and I'm happy that it's Friday the 13th. So the joke I have is who will be the last victim this Friday the 13th? My Linktree is probably the best way to contact me. So it's Linktree film, 4 life. LIFE, and my website, my social media handles are all there. And I want to say I've been a fan of the show for a long time. And, I think it was right after we completed filming, and, I told Gustavo, like, hey, when we're getting ready to release this film, I want to be on that podcast. and so I somehow Jedi mind trick my way into this. I'm really happy to be here.
Liz, what do you remember about our talk with Naveen?
I remember him being a really good storyteller. I mean, that's genuinely what I remember. I remember we asked questions, he answered the questions. Sometimes people don't answer the questions and they go off on these long tangents, but he answered them in this like really beautiful poetic way, where there was just like a long engrossing story that had a beginning, middle, and end, and took me to another place. And I remember Naveen asked afterwards, he's like, how'd it go? And before we even recorded, he was like, oh, I'm really shy. And then no, that shyness was not apparent at all. He was just a very good storyteller. And I loved how honest he was. I thought it was a great show.
Yeah, I did too. And I thought it was not, first off, it was not at all what I was expecting. I was expecting a very different type of conversation and a very kind of different type of person, to be honest. hearing about his background as a producer and producing first and then leading into, directing many, many years later, I thought that was really fascinating. And that, he was able to get this money together and pull a budget together on a level that most indie filmmakers don't do for their first feature. But it was because of all the producing experience that he had. Like, he just had more avenues open to him through the work that he did as a producer, so that when he was ready to make the jump to director, it's like he had this knowledge, and that he was at a certain level that like kind of jumped a couple levels for most indie filmmakers. Like, most of us don't start with Ron Perlman in our movies, over $1 million budgets. Like, that's just not what happens. But for him, it did. And like, he got his trailer premiered at IGN, got like thousands and thousands of hits on the first day. It's like very cool stuff. So I was really excited to talk to him and just to kind of hear about the process and the way that he got to where he was. Cause I thought that it was like he was rich or that he knew rich people, but it was not that at all. It was like a very processed approach. So it was really cool to just to hear how it all played out.
I know, as you're talking, I'm also remembering all these other things that he mentioned, like how he could have moved to LA, but he decided to stay in Chicago. How the relationships he had. I mean, it was like the relationships he had and the way he connected with people on a human level propelled his career as a producer and as a director. I mean, it wasn't some like factor of being in Los Angeles and connecting with 15 million, wannabe studio types. It was making meaningful relationships outside of Los Angeles that actually turned things around for him. I think that's really interesting too. I'm excited. I think I'll actually watch this movie. I'm going to look into it.
Wow, cool.
That's rare for me.
Well, I like the trailer. It's really cool. So yeah, I hope I get a chance to see it too. And yeah, just the whole story about him finding the writer and his relationship with the writer and how that whole went. And then like, his like vision quest or whatever he did in Arizona is like, wow, like what a story, like what a different way to approach it. Like, I never really did anything like that to like mentally prepare myself I just made movies to mentally prepare myself to make movies. I didn't like go through vision quests. I mean, I did run a couple of marathons, but that was like not part of the filmmaking. That was just my own personal choice, Very fascinating conversation.
Well, I have a conversation that I think will be half as fascinating, and so I will attempt it here. So last week we talked a little bit about, I guess our listeners should hear. So we recorded like a much longer conversation about press pieces, and I wanted to cut out like half of it because I felt like I went rogue in the middle of the conversation. I started bringing up other articles. I started talking about my feelings with regard to piracy. And I thought, well, let's just cut that out then, and let's bring it up in a whole new topic in the show. So I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on piracy. Piracy came up last week because it was at the CinemaCon. They were talking about CinemaCon, and they were talking about how piracy impacts, as soon as you do a day and date and as soon as a film's available on streaming, the argument was that piracy goes rampant. And what I said on the show last week that I asked to get cut out is that I don't really care that much about piracy. Anyway, I will say more later, but I wanted to send it over to you to see what your thoughts are on piracy.
And when you say you don't care about piracy, do you mean you don't care about piracy of your own movies, or you don't care about piracy in general of any movie?
I have only been thinking about it with regard to my films, but I think that the same argument could be applied to a lot of indie filmmakers who are quote unquote emerging, right? It's the perspective of we're not making a lot of money anyway. We're being cut out of the conversation with regard to revenue for the most part. This is a chance for some exposure. But I do want to acknowledge that people deserve to be compensated for their work, and art does have value. So we'll acknowledge that right now.
Right. Well, here, I had a long thing about piracy. Okay. So when I was much younger, when Napster and everything was happening, like I was like big into that, like downloading albums and everything. And then when I found out like, oh my gosh, you can download movies, you can download video games, you can download all these things for free. Like I was so into it, and I was like totally a part of that and doing that and everything. And then at some point, I just realized that like for movies, it's like if I'm downloading the newest, like kind of whatever, like, cause I would download anything. Like I would download whatever I wanted, basically, just like whatever movie I could find, like, the new movie, an older movie, like whatever movie that I was interested in watching, and I would just put it on a thumb drive, plug it into my PlayStation, and then just watch it on my big screen, just like anything else. And I think at some point I realized, well, if I can pay for it, like I should pay for it, because if I don't pay for it, then I'm basically killing the industry that I'm begging to be a part of, that I'm like slamming my face against the wall every day, trying to make money as a filmmaker and trying to get my first feature made to like, you know, hopefully make a career out of this and get paid. It's like the least I can do is pay for the content I watch. So then I made a new rule that if I could buy it or rent it anywhere, I would do that before downloading it. And I'd only download something if there was no way for me to pay for it. And that's sort of where I'm at now, although I haven't really downloaded anything in a long time because, you know, you pretty much find anything and pay for it, you know?
Except for
so
Airheads.
That's sort of like my Airheads. Wow. Really? That's so funny.
Well, last I checked.
I love Airheads. Airheads is amazing. God, I watched that movie so many times. TBS, man. So, but that's like one part of it, right? But then for my own movies, it's like, yeah, I don't really care because it's like, you know, more people who watch it, the better. Like, I'm not really making money. Although I did have a friend who made a movie and like, you know, it got pirated all over the place. And then he was like upset. So he's like, well, now like the little sales I did get, like I'm not going to get as many because it's all on these torrent sites already, you know? And to me, I think it's like inevitable. Like it's just gonna get on a torrent site, you know? So like why fight it? Like why, you know, make a big deal? But like, I'm not like pro it. I'm not like, yes, pirate my movie, please. Like I do what I can to stop it. But you know, it's pretty much like it's going to happen. Like if you're sharing it with a bunch of film festivals, if you're sharing it, you know, through the internet, like the likelihood that it slips out somewhere, you know, through some firewall or something, like it's bound to happen. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, I guess is what I'm trying to say as a filmmaker. But like, I'm not going out there to support piracy. Like I'm trying I'm actively not being a part of it and just paying for my content. And, you know, especially like if an indie filmmaker makes a movie and even if they send me a digital link to watch it for free, like if I like the filmmaker and I like the movie, like I'll rent the movie just to support them and like be one more view for them. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, yeah, that's why that whole article is so stupid. It's just like, oh, we're fighting piracy. 1 week longer for Spider-Man not to be out with pirates. It's like, it's gonna be out and the people who are watching it, like looking for it on torrents, they're not gonna give a shit if they have to wait 1 week versus having it the day of. Like they don't care. Like I waited like 6 months for Spider-Man to become available on digital so I could buy it for $20 so I could watch it at home because I didn't want to go to the theaters at the time, you know? Like, but these pirates, like there are people who are using them. 1 week's not going to matter. 2 weeks, months not going to matter. They'll just wait until they can find it on their torrent, you know? So yeah. I just thought that was just that's just like a bullshit, like rah, meaningless speech from that conference. And then the article the news article, like we were going to do a news article this week and it was almost like the same. It was just another rah bullshit thing that is just like, this is bullshit, dude. Like you're just trying to like appease your stockholders, your stakeholders, try to make them say like, yes, original TV, traditional television still has a future. We just have to innovate it and think of it differently and it's going to evolve, man. It's not going to go away. It's going to evolve. It's like, oh, shut the fuck up. It's going away. It's not going to be there in 50 years. Or if it is, it's going to be such a smaller segment of the market. And that's what you're seeing in all these things is like these people are getting so fat on such a big percentage of everything for the whole like existence of entertainment, like big networks, big companies like owned everything. And they had so many eyeballs just for them. And now everything is separated and segmented. And there's so many different ways you can get your content now. Yeah. Those big pieces of the pie aren't there anymore. And they have to fucking deal with it. They got to move on. They got to figure out other ways to make money. Stop trying to pretend that you can go back to the way it was. No, you can't. It's going to be we have a different future ahead of us. Anyway, soapbox done.
No, I like the soapbox. I'm also just thinking of, I do sales and I talk to filmmakers regularly about their distribution situation as a consultant. And I've had clients come to me and they say, oh, I'm angry at my distributor. They didn't use any piracy takedown services. And if you go on Pirate Bay or whatever, I don't know what people use anymore. You see 3 pages of my film.
Pirate Bay's dead.
Okay. I really liked Pirate Bay. That's the one I used a long time ago. And I think it's a fair concern, but I also think that the amount of stress that filmmakers have that they put towards anti-piracy measures the ratio is unhealthy. because the focus should be elsewhere. If someone's going to torrent something, or if they're going to rip it, if they're going to pirate it, they're probably going to do it. They're going to find a way. They're going to find a way to do it. So ultimately, you should be focusing your attention towards the audience that's going to properly compensate you for your work instead of paying for anti-piracy measures. And I think there's law of diminishing return to this, or I don't know what I'm saying, but my argument is that for the indie filmmaker who doesn't have a lot of resources, use the resources towards marketing. Don't use that money or your ire towards piracy, and utilize piracy to your own benefit. I had this guy, I think he's in Scandinavia. He said that he saw my movie, sent me an email, and I was like, "Oh, how'd you see it?" And he's like, "Oh, I hope you're not upset. I pirated it. And I just sent $300 to your PayPal to apologize for it and to take you out for dinner."
Wow.
And it's like, that's more money that I've made transactionally over the past few months. Is that $300? So like,
a lot.
Yeah, I'm totally okay. Like, someone saw the movie, he wanted to connect. He was saying, thank you for the experience. And we should focus on connecting with our audience rather than piracy. And I don't know. I think I too often make these soapbox statements about how piracy doesn't matter. And I just thought we should have a conversation to put in the forefront that there are more important things. I mean, your distributor should be marketing your film. That's the more important thing, you know?
Right.
You shouldn't have 15 million people taking percentage of your revenue. Like, those are more important things than it being on some sort of torrent service. That's all.
Right. Because I don't think it's like customers who were going to buy it online or whatever are like suddenly like, oh, it's a torrent? Oh, I won't pay for it. It's like there's people who download movies illegally and that's how they get their entertainment. And there's people who pay for it. And so I don't think you're losing out to a market if if your movie gets pirated, right? Like, it's not going to be like, and the person who's like, oh, I heard about Bread and Butter. Let me see if I can download it for free. If it's not on the torrent, they're probably not going to go pay for it anyways. They're just going to watch the next movie. Else.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I feel like for us, especially for indie filmmakers, like getting that one fan who watched the movie, even though they pirated, but they felt compelled enough to email you, and then even more compelled enough to send you $300.
I know.
Which is like, I don't know, 100 movies, 100 movie nights right there or something. Like, so that's nice. Crazy. And it's like amazing. So I feel like it's like almost like yeah, you should have your movie pirated so you can find the super fan who wants to send you $300. Like, that's probably better. I don't know. I'm not trying to advocate for it. I'm just saying that, like, for little guys like us, it's just better to, it's just people seeing it is better than people not seeing it, is what I'm trying to say, I
don't know if you're watching the new Joe Bob Briggs season, The Last Drive-In on Shudder.
Oh, no.
Former guest of the show, Joe Bob Briggs. But he did Night of the Living Dead as his 100th episode. And he's got a really nice ending monologue for indie filmmakers and how we should never expect any revenue as a first-time filmmaker, an emerging filmmaker, and just to get it out there as fast as you can so that you can move on to the next project and really start to make an imprint on this industry. And I thought it was a really nice reality check for all of us. So check it out.
Nice. Good old Joe Bob. Always got a great little thing for indie filmmakers. Love that guy. It's really fun that I just love that we had him on the show, and I love his show. It's pretty great. So I wanted to talk to you really briefly about one more thing, as long as we're not like over time. I lost my counter here. I usually have a little
I think we have a few minutes. We're at 31.
Okay. I just want to know really quick, what are you watching? 3 things you're watching right now. Hit me.
God.
And it could be whatever you're watching.
Better Call Saul, because Sean makes me watch it, and it is rewarding.
Yes.
It's rewarding, but he does make me watch it.
I'm addicted right now. I'm so into it. Really I can't wait to watch the next episode.
The Masked Singer every Wednesday, because it is my favorite show, and it's the only thing that keeps me sane, is The Masked Singer. And we just watched Shakma, which is a really silly horror film that I think Lucas Colshaw recommended to me. I need to check my sources on that one. But it's about a rabid baboon killer. Okay, now you.
So Better Call Saul, obsessed, just love it. We just finished Minx, which was great.
Jake Johnson is it's on the list. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. And, I have not been the biggest fan of him. I find him okay. Like, I'm like, oh, yeah, he's entertaining enough. Fine, whatever. But like this was like, oh, he's a great actor. I was like, this show won me over with him. So if you're a Jake Johnson fan, then you're going to fucking love this show. It's really good. Also period piece, also just really funny. And then, yeah, I mean, movies like I watched Pig was the latest thing. I love Pig. I tried watching The Green Knight. I hated it. I hated The Green Knight. It put me to sleep. It was so boring.
It's on our list.
Oh,
but
have you seen it?
Well, it's on our list. We're watching Come On, and then The Green Knight after that. But do you like? I like David Lowery a lot. Did you like the Ghost Story movie?
I haven't seen any of his other movies.
Okay.
No, but like. I hope his other movies are better than this, because I feel bad if this is what his filmmaking is, because it was like devoid of any kind of emotion or feeling or any way of like connecting with the characters. It was just beautiful. It was like beautiful set piece, beautiful this, so beautiful. It was like the most beautiful, intricate like design and shot and whatever. But like, and fine performances even, but just like the story, like nothing to grab me to make me give a shit, and like nothing about the characters that made me even give a shit. I didn't care. I don't give a shit. Like, it's the most beautiful thing in the world, but I'd rather sleep than watch this, because I just do not care about any of the characters. It's like, I should though, because it's such a cool story. It's such a cool idea, but he's managed to take something that's so beautiful and such an interesting concept and make the most boring thing I've ever seen in my life. I don't even know how he did it. And I'm sorry, David Lowery, to be so, I know, because like I know people love him. We've talked to people who know him. Yeah. I'm sure he's a wonderful person. I know he's obviously very talented, but like, my God, like, I don't understand like how this happened. I don't even know how A24 decided that this was a script to go with, because it's like, really? I mean, you look at the trailer and you're like, this is going to be the greatest movie I've ever seen in my life. This looks amazing. Like, I can't wait. But then when you watch the actual movie, you're like, all these talented people, and like, this is what we have. Man, I'm sorry to hate it so much, but I want you to watch it to tell me why I'm wrong. Because I have, wrong.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to watch it and be like, oh, I love this. This is amazing. And you know, it's probably going to be stoked by this, what you just did. Like maybe what I thought was mediocre before. I'm now just going to like go full in on my licorice
maybe
pizza.
Maybe it all pays off in the end of the movie. But like after an hour and 45 minutes, like, and having to wake myself up twice because I was so bored to tears, I couldn't. I was so mad at the movie because what it is, it's like all these little short stories they took from like this old poem, and they tried to string them together to tell one's like long narrative. But it's like, you could tell they're like little tiny little poem stories from like the 1800s or something, whatever. And it's like, or Middle Ages, I think, even like super old. And they're like, they should have been short films. It's not a feature. It's like little shorts. But anyways, I don't know. Universe, tell me why I'm wrong. People told me why I'm wrong about licorice pizza, so please tell me why I'm wrong about The Green Knight, because obviously a lot of talent went into making it. I just wish it was better.
Well, that's a good call to action. So if you want to write in and throw your weight behind Alrik's argument against The Green Knight, or if you want to, debate with him a little bit, send us a question, comment, or suggestion to podcast@makingmoviesishard.com. You can also leave us a review on iTunes. That would be very much appreciated. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at MMIH Podcast, YouTube at Making Movies is Hard Podcast. We want to celebrate the International Screenwriters Association, an organization designed to connect writers through filmmakers through a number of programs they offer. Head on over to www.networkisa.org to sign up for free today. We want to thank Naveen for coming on the show. Thanks to listener Gustavo Martin for introducing us to Naveen and making all this happen. Thank you to our fantastic editor, Jeff Freimuth, for doing the editing. Thanks to our producer, Eric Toms, for being awesome. Thanks to all of you for listening, and talk to y'all next week.
Should I do one more excited? And here's our chat with Naveen Chathapuram. Yay! You can do whatever one you want, Jeff. It's up to you. Probably the first one. It's less silly.